Welcome to Modern Morality. My name is Mikey, and I'm joined here by John.
Hello, everyone.
And Johnny.
Hello.
Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoy. Alrighty, welcome back to Modern Morality. I'm joined today by Johnny, John, and today we have a very special guest. He's a defense investigator, Josh. Say hello to everybody.
Hey, how are y'all?
I don't think they can answer back, but let's keep going. So with Josh being a defense investigator, the topic today is going to be talking vaguely about the legal system and how morality may tie to it. And I kind of want to talk about the difference between what's legal and what's moral. And if you guys want to branch off and start that conversation, go for it.
Well, I would hope they would align, but we'll see where it goes.
Do they always align or no?
I'll start this conversation. It's always interested me that investigators, especially people who are investigating criminal activity, they can lie to a defendant. And I've always wondered where that line is drawn as to where they can get by with lying to somebody and whether it interferes with their morality when they're doing it. Got a comment?
It's actually a good point. I know that's a regular practice in like a law enforcement investigation. In my job right now, I always do my best to be as upfront and honest with our clients, because that's essentially what they are, when I talk about the case, when I do the investigation. When I talk to witnesses, when I talk to victims, I can't always get into the details because of the attorney-client privilege, which I fall under. But I still try to be as forthcoming as I can when we do discuss things. You know, I'll tell them, okay, I got this information from a police report. I got this information from an indictment or an accusation. I'm not going to discuss what a client and I discuss because obviously, I mean, that's privileged. But the information that can be obtained from other sources, I'm usually comfortable talking to them about that. I'm saying a lot.
No, it's
So all that makes sense to me, John. I'm sitting here pondering what you said, though. What's an example of a lie that they would tell, and is it for a purpose? Is it purpose-driven?
Not that I listen to crime stories or anything, but there's situations where you'll have an individual that is being interrogated, and the law enforcement officers will say, "We know you were there. We know you did it. We have a witness. We have multiple witnesses."
Yeah.
And then if there's multiple defendants, they'll always pit one against the other and say, your partner in crime over here admitted guilt. It said that you're actually the one that committed the crime. And that kind of thing, I like to see justice, upheld, but I wonder just where
it becomes manipulation.
Yeah, and where it crosses that line of morality. I mean, you want to hold your law enforcement officials to some standard.
Do the ends justify the means?
Quit asking questions.
I got a reputation for asking questions, John.
He answers questions with questions.
That's the Socratic method. So
that's right.
That's the best way to keep people talking.
But that's the kind of thing that I mean is.
Well, you see it not just in serious felony investigations on the law enforcement end. And for example, you get a traffic stop. An officer walks up to the window. I smell marijuana in the car. Can I search your car? Or just come up, hey, do you mind if I search your car? You have so many people that are so willing to try to explain their way out of a situation or to try to, well, I'm not doing anything wrong, let them in the car, that they almost always get themselves into trouble.
Well, I've always heard that if you're ever questioned by a law officer, say nothing, because if you open your mouth, you're opening yourself up to possible charges. I mean, there's nothing good can come out of it.
Well, you're not going to explain your way out of something.
No, you're not. You're not going to talk your way out of it.
No, it's almost always an instance where you dig the hole deeper and then you start trying to remember what you've said, even when you've told the truth. What have I told them? What have I not told them? and you just get yourself into more trouble.
And people like myself, I misspeak all the time.
What?
So, yeah. So if you say the wrong words in the wrong order, and especially if they've got it recorded, body cams work both ways.
That's exactly right.
When they're on, they do. Yep.
Well, they're supposed to be on anytime the state patrolman stops your car.
Well, that's a policy issue for each and every department when you get into state, local, and county jurisdictions.
Right. But what gets you in trouble, what gets the law enforcement officer in trouble, is if he makes a stop and there's a controversy and there's no body cam footage, but it's the department's policy that the body cam be on when they make a stop.
Well, in most, and I haven't dealt with state patrol on this very much, but in most local and county jurisdictions, that trouble doesn't come up unless somebody makes a complaint.
That's
So-
true.
The person pulled over in the traffic stop. If they don't file a complaint with the department because of that policy violation, it never goes any further.
Right.
And then sometimes it never goes any further anyway.
Yeah.
Well, going back to what we were discussing earlier, as far as legality versus morality, is there an example of something that's legal but not moral?
Legal, but not moral.
See, there's going to be some
Let's start
examples.
start with the other direction.
Well, yeah,
What's-
and
what's-
so one of the
what's-
examples that when I was doing some research on the topic, or the idea was, they were saying, and this was the scenario used. Let's say there's somebody walking, it's like 2 a.m., they're in the middle, they're walking down the sidewalk, and they get to a crosswalk. Well, the crosswalk signal says don't walk. The person looks both ways, he stands there 10 minutes after hitting the button, and the thing never changes. Well, eventually he just gets tired of waiting, he walks across.
He's jaywalking.
Technically, it's not legal, but is it immoral?
No, that's not immoral.
That's
Who's
the
it
general
affect?
consensus.
Right.
Consensus is it's not immoral. So I wouldn't say it's it's kind of unaffected, but yeah.
Well, there's TV shows out there too. I mean, Leverage comes to mind, where
Oh,
they
yeah.
break the law all the time
The Robin
because
Hood
of
effect.
morality.
Yeah, the Robin Hood effect.
Yeah. So I mean, there's your flip side of that.
Josh, you ever comment?
I'm thinking through this. When it comes to morality in the law, where does a crime without a victim play in? Because who is it negatively impacting?
Well, then you can bring in prostitution. You can bring in gambling. There's all kinds of things that you can question.
That's legal in some places.
It is, but is it if it's illegal in other places and you are gambling, is that immoral?
I would say one's definition of morality would be the same whether they were in a state where that's legal or a state where that's illegal.
Right.
That's probably true too.
Yeah.
But just for a hypothetical, you look at, for instance, an officer with a department. Their department says that obviously you don't break any laws. That's that's part of the job. That's part
yeah.
of the what should be in the oath of office. But then they also have, you don't use marijuana. You go to Colorado on vacation, it's perfectly legal there. Go to California on vacation, it's legal there. You get back and
Get drug tested.
you get drug tested and fired for a policy violation. Well,
Yeah. No, that's the
There's a-
exact
there's a-
situation happens, or very similar to when I was working in manufacturing. The place I was working was headquartered in Michigan, and they would send people up to the headquarters to watch. Basically, this is how our plant's going to be in 5 years. So they'd go and see the original plant, which has grown significantly since it started, and marijuana's legal up there. People will go up there on a business trip for 2 to 3 days. They come back, and you can tell they had a great time. But one of the issues with that is, in that environment, they didn't get drug tested because they knew, but it was more of they were needed.
Right.
If they were to do a policy violation on that, they would have no employees.
well, but I mean, when you get into policy violations, that's more of an administrative thing than a legal thing. So
Well, you've got a growing number of employees across the country now who are not testing for marijuana like they used to, especially not for hiring. They might for accidents or calls, but
right.
most of them have realized now that they're kind of chasing that when they're trying to get employees all the time anyway.
Right.
Can we introduce the property of legislating morality? I don't think we've hit that subject. Is now a good time to bring
think
that
so.
bring that in?
Can we legislate morality? That's another question,
We're trying
John.
to.
I was going to say they certainly try.
We're trying to. What the subject we've just been talking about, alcohol, in the 30s was prohibited. They were trying to legislate morality. That alcohol was a bad thing. Same thing with marijuana. Same thing with a lot of things that especially in the Bible Belt. There's a lot of things that companies want to legislate because they. So I'd like to continue this conversation about what happens when a locality, a government, a business tries to legislate morality of their employees or their constituents or their communities.
Well, 9 times out of 10, the legislation or the law that they try to impose is against an activity, not a morality. Like, for instance, the alcohol thing. Alcohol's never hurt anybody. Some people abuse alcohol. Some people do things they shouldn't while seeking alcohol.
Well, let's change it to the use of alcohol, the use of drugs.
In excess or in general?
When you prohibit it, it's in general.
Yeah, that's kind of my point. So they can't really, there's no way that they can legislate or regulate somebody's abuse of something without just blanketly stopping the something, right?
Trying to stop
the something.
We look at the very nature of legislation. It's reactive. It's always reactive.
Right.
There's something that causes this bill to be proposed or passed or whatever. Like right now, I saw recently in a legislative update, they're talking about expanding the licensed medical marijuana growers in the state of Georgia. They're talking about legalizing sports betting in Georgia. I mean, where it goes, who knows? But it's just another one of those. It's reactive.
It is reactive, and it usually. I like to use this term. The majority is being punished for the deeds of the few. You get someone who does something, and I'll just delve
in excess.
In excess, I'll just delve into this. They want right now. There's legislation trying to prohibit AR-15s. It's like Johnny said, AR-15s has never killed anybody.
It's a tool.
It's a tool. Right. And they're wanting to ban it because of the deeds of a few.
So one of the things, and I think I talked about it in a previous episode before, is what is the role of the government when it comes to morality in this place and in this conversation. So we all know, I know many people call them granny laws, seatbelt laws, things that should be common sense, but the federal government is saying you have to do this now or else you're going to be charged, fined, whatever. Would it not be better, or I don't want to say moral, would it not be better to have everybody be responsible for their own actions without having to be handheld from the federal government? Is it the federal government's job to protect our morals and our values, or to protect us from ourselves in a way, in our own?
Now you're really getting a segue into our political episode we hadn't had yet. It depends on if you believe in big government, small government, republic versus democracy.
Well, we keep talking about how it's usually the abuse of something which leads to a law. So is it the federal government's job to regulate our inability to not abuse something, or our ability to abuse something? Is that the role of the government in this case? Is that something you can legislate, or should that be an individual decision?
All right, John's going to slap my hand, but I'm going to ask a question. The question is, are you trying to force your thoughts on someone by passing a law, or are you trying to protect people by passing a law? For example, there used to be these things called blue laws. I don't know if y'all remember them. Blue laws were laws.
Just barely.
I think John was around
They
when
were-
laws originally were
I think I
created.
may have helped write them.
Did you?
Were they black and white laws?
That was before they colored them.
Before they became
Yeah.
blue. That's before we had color.
Exactly right.
The blue laws align themselves actually to the predominant religion in the area.
Right.
And so, like a blue law would be, you can't sell anything but restaurants and food
Alcohol
on Sunday before a certain time. Well, what was that protecting people from? Or was it just trying to enforce the idea of going to church?
It was to keep the preacher from showing up drunk.
Ah,
Well, I mean,
Who could drink after church?
after church.
The night before.
look at like status offenses. That's it. An example of that's like truancy. It's illegal for a kid to not be in school, but that is, it doesn't even apply to adulthood. I mean, that is directly trying to legislate
Well,
somebody's behavior.
One might argue that that's actually targeting the parents anyway, not the kid. But
Yeah.
Well, and trying to think of how much I can go into. My office also deals with juvenile court. So we have a whole division that deals with truancy, and they call them CHINS laws, child in need of services. So you have kids who have violated juvenile laws, but of course most of these laws don't roll over to an adult. Using a vape. It's illegal for a kid to use a vape. It's illegal for a kid to buy a gun. It's illegal for a kid to drive. You've got all these offenses that.
so those laws are trying to take the place of them having good parents that should be doing
Well, I mean,
that
that's
anyway.
exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there was a comment made in one of our other episodes too, was if the parents aren't going to take control of the kids, the government will, or something similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
Should we start putting limits on stuff like that for kids, or should it be open reign to let the parents do what they need to do?
Well, just look at right now, the news out of Atlanta. The state legislature is investigating DFACs for housing children in DFACs offices, putting beds and bringing them food, and instead of putting them with foster parents, putting them with some sort of family member that's going to take care of them. It's almost like warehousing kids in a state office building.
What
So
was
to
the purpose of that?
Yeah, what's driving
They
that?
they don't have the personnel to investigate and to make sure that where they place these children make them safer than where they were pulled from.
Well, is that a problem of staffing, or is it a problem of policy?
It's a problem of people writing policies without funding. You know, it's easy to sit in an office and say, well, we need to do this and we need to do that. And then you give it to the people who have to enforce it, and they say, we can't do that. Sorry about that, Mikey.
You're good. I'll find you later. Don't worry.
Okay.
It's just like in a business when you have the C-suite executives making the rules and not getting the input from the people who actually do the job.
Yeah.
You're going to have those same issues.
What was that? What's that you used to use all the time, Johnny? About the knowledge, where it's located?
Yeah, the 80-20 rule. Yeah, where 80% of the knowledge is within 20 feet of where it happens. But, you know, to Josh's point, that's usually not where the rules are made.
Exactly.
Which, and I know this is going toward politics, and we'll wrap it back into law enforcement. But I mean, originally the idea of politicians, they weren't politicians; they were farmers, they were workers, and they would represent that community. Whereas now people go to school to be politicians.
Well, politics is an occupation now.
Yeah, at
It's
one,
not a hobby.
I think when Reagan was the president, they kind of criticized him because he was an actor. But he was one of the most influential presidents we've ever had in the history of.
I think
the
most of our
US.
politicians are actors nowadays.
Right.
Just saying.
But he had a position that wasn't politics. He did his own thing, and Trump, same thing.
So you made the comment we're going to get back off of politics and back on to
Well, they
law
when it
enforcement.
comes
How
to-
do you separate law enforcement and politics? What are they enforcing? What is law enforcement enforcing?
There he goes again.
Another question for you, John. We need to start keeping a tally of questions in the episode.
When I go to the post edit, I'll put a little ding every time you do it. But yeah, I mean, it is hard to separate politics when it comes to law enforcement because I mean, politicians make the laws that law enforcement are supposed to enforce. But
And-
the one thing that I would like to delve in, and you may have a lot of experience with this, Josh, is I've seen a lot on the news where judges are refusing to interpret laws the way they were originally intended to fit their agenda.
You talking about like judicial activism?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah.
It's
So,
definitely a
so
problem.
what's the point of the laws?
That in itself seems immoral.
Right. What's the point of having a body of representatives form a law that's supposed to be best for its constituents when you have people in the judicial system not adhering to the original interpretation of the bill?
Well, I mean, it's a constitutional encroachment. I mean, there's a division of powers, a separation of powers for a reason. I mean, you have the legislature to come up with the laws, you have the executive branch to execute and enforce the laws, and then you have the judicial system, which is supposed, or the judiciary, which is supposed to rule on it dispassionately. But you've got, it's almost like a whole wing of politicians going into the judiciary that they're legislating from the bench.
This is one of the things that bothers me, and it's like you say, it's hard to separate the two. It's when a decision is made in a court, and then it is appealed to another court, and that appeal may be to the same jurisdiction, it may be outside the jurisdiction, and you've got defense attorneys and other people who are out there looking for judges that they feel will rule in their favor.
Judge shopping.
Judge shopping, that's exactly what it is. And I didn't know that was a term.
That is a term.
Okay. But that kind of bothers me. It's like you know, let a court make a decision and then appeal to the Supreme Court and let them decide whether it's worth a second look. But don't just go through 5 courts and every court change its mind.
Right.
Well, ask each parent till you get the answer you want.
That's exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, crap. I forgot to ask that in the form of a question. Sorry.
Yeah. Is it like when you ask your
Well, Mikey, what do you think my response to that would be?
Well, I'll tell you
Johnny again?
what I'd like to do is I want to take advantage of our guest's time, and I'd like to hear a little bit more of his experience and in general, because we can sit here and philosophize all day long. Josh, in your experience, how has morality changed throughout your career? Have you seen it get worse, better?
Or
How's, what do you see on the streets, so to speak?
before you answer, is it, and just to tie into it, it's kind of the same question. Have you seen the law enforcement or something put more weight on morality now versus when you first started? So it's not
Gonna
even
make
how
you
morality.
think about that one.
Yeah, it's not even
Yeah.
how morality has changed. It's how much morality is even being sewn into the laws that you're enforcing.
Well, I started my law enforcement career in the early 2000s, and I have strictly worked investigations my entire career. I've had a couple of times that I've jumped out of it, but usually it was something investigation related. But then when I got back to it, trying to think, I've definitely seen a change in hiring standards. And while that doesn't relate directly to morality, when you lower the bar for the people you're accepting a wider field of different moral compasses.
No, I think
You
that
mean
does,
they're not all Andy Griffith?
None of them are Andy Griffith.
No, I think that does tie into morality, though, because the whole point of a hiring process is to vet which one would be not only who meets these requirements, but also would be a good fit. And the good fit, it's typically regarding values and their morality.
Right.
Well, if the bar is being lowered, that means they may not fit those values the same way they used to.
I'm trying to think specifically on what I've seen. I don't know that lowering the standards necessarily opens it up to anybody and everybody's, whatever moral framework they have. I think it's just you get a lot more issues with training, with experience, with capability. When we talked about it before we started recording, I don't know that a whole lot's changed either way during the time I got in up till now, up till when I moved over to doing defense work. Is it on TV more? Absolutely. Is it being caught more? Absolutely. Everybody's got a camera in their pocket. Officers have cameras clipped to their shirt or attached to their sunglasses or strapped to the front of their car in most cases. You're catching a lot more instances, and you have how many 24-hour news channels now that have to fill time.
So you're saying it really is no different than anything else in our society. It was always there. It's just more publicized these days. More transparency, maybe.
I don't know that it would be noticeable if you tracked it, if you graphed it.
Let me ask you a pointed question. When you
John,
were
You're really going to ask a question?
one question. I'm
Okay.
allowed one question.
So I have to answer in the form of a question.
Jeopardy.
Yeah, there you go. I didn't answer a question with a question. When you were hired, did they hire you for a specific set of skills, or did they hire you because of your political background? Did they hire you because they thought that you were good at what you do? What was the hiring criteria? Your experience?
Are you talking about when I first got into law enforcement or where I'm at now?
Where you're at now?
I think a lot of it had to do with experience. They had a very experienced 20-plus year criminal defense investigator retiring, and I had a pretty broad scope of experience. I started out working undercover narcotics. I did that for several years in a couple of different places.
Yeah, they say that work is addicting.
That work is that is stressful. That is
That was rather punny.
I'll withdraw. No.
When I came over here, get back to what I was saying. I started out working narcotics, and I've worked in prosecutors' offices. I've worked as a district attorney's investigator in a couple of different places, a couple of different times. And I've worked everything from the speeding case that gets appealed out of probate court into superior court because there's not a state court to catch it, DUIs, that type of thing, up to murders, officer-involved shootings, public corruption cases, just the whole gamut. And I think that was part of the draw.
Josh, one of the things I want to do is circle back to a statement you said about how news is spread and how everybody has a camera in their hand, and when news breaks about especially like an officer involved shooting, that kind of thing, you see all of these horrible images on TV. What do you think about the way the media handles things like that, and they only give out partial information? They don't tell you what led up to the incident. They only show you the incident itself. Is that something that you have to deal with in your line of work?
Quite often. When you get video or images of something especially horrific, something you see on the news, and you don't have the context, you don't have the why, you don't have the background information, you don't have the story. In a criminal investigation, it doesn't matter if you're working on the state side, the defense side, or whatever, your objective is to get the truth. The truth doesn't change if you're representing somebody or you're trying to investigate something. But when you get a criminal defense team, they shouldn't be releasing information and video if they have it for what their client may or may not have been involved in the case. Law enforcement, in the best of circumstances, shouldn't be releasing information or video footage or anything like that until their investigation's complete. So what you're having is the news media, who a lot of times it's a 24-hour cycle. They've got to fill time. I know you've all heard the "when it bleeds, it leads" catchphrase when it's talking about the media. They're going for the most sensational thing they can find to put on the air.
Clickbait.
So they can keep it going, so they can keep those viewers and those ratings up.
Well, that's the motivation behind the media, but what's the motivation behind the people that are letting this information out? Is it agendas they have, or is it reactionary to some pressure or
Well, if you're
response?
dealing with just somebody on the street with a camera, or 10 somebodies on the street with a camera,
Yeah,
showing-
I was thinking more the official people, but yes.
Okay,
I
well,
got you.
let's start with that. When you have just your average Joe on the street, or 10 Joes, like I said, filming the same thing from 10 different angles, you don't know. It might just be, hey, look what I saw, posting it online,
And they may only have gotten the last 30 seconds of the incident.
The whole
That's
situation.
exactly right.
Yeah.
But for instance, look at the Nicholas Sandman, the Covington Catholic school kids that went to Washington for the March to Life, and you have a couple of minutes worth of him encountering one of the activists there. Everybody jumped on board. Oh, look at this, look at this kid. He's just a punk. He's just a whatever. When you didn't have anything put in context as to what happened. When the actual official story broke and somebody released the full footage of what had happened, the news media dropped it like a hot potato.
But the damage had already been done.
That's exactly right. And that's why he's a lot wealthier than he was before it happened. And you have a lot of news organizations that won't say his name.
Yeah.
And probably are legally prohibited from saying his name.
You're talking about 10 different cameras from 10 different
Right.
angles. Let's talk about the one camera angle that's the most difficult to read, and that's the one on the officer's chest.
Okay.
Tell us something about what he's looking at and what he's seeing and what's happening.
What I have found, and this is just a personal observation from what I have seen. Like I said, I've worked quite a few officer shootings. The predominant camera that's used, it's made by one specific company. It mounts to the officer's chest, clips on their shirt. If you've got an officer-involved shooting, you need to know what the officer knew, what he saw, and the context it all happened in. When you have something strapped to the front of your shirt that will be completely blocked by your hands when you draw a weapon, especially if you have to fire the weapon, you don't see anything. You shouldn't start training officers to shoot low and not aim. So there needs to be some sort of change in how the cameras are oriented.
GoPro headbands.
Some departments have them that are actually mounted to like a safety glasses. And in that instance, I think that one's the best because
you get the direct line of sight.
well, you see what the officer sees while the shooting's happening, but you also see everything that led up to that incident.
Mm-hmm.
The officer turns his head to the right, you see what he was looking at.
Yeah.
Somebody snuck up behind him. You don't see him, but the officer didn't see him either.
That would eliminate a lot of the shootings. Like, we saw something being thrown. Well, if you're like you said, there's the arms blocking the chest. You don't
Right.
see that object
Right.
being chunked.
And then
So-
the same thing with a vehicle-mounted camera, a dash camera. It's locked into place.
Yeah.
It's looking forward. You don't see if something happened to the left or right of the vehicle or behind the vehicle. So you're missing a lot of context with the way these things are positioned. Now, something else, and I think Johnny was getting to the point earlier, the official release on a video. In a lot of instances with any sort of allegation of officer misconduct or excessive force complaints or an officer-involved shooting, you'll have the department rushing to the closest camera with a press credential attached to it. This is what happened. Let me show you the footage. As soon as they can. I mean, in a lot of instances, they will hold back until they get what they need out of it. But even that's reactionary because they're trying to keep their town from getting burned down or, some sort of massive uprising or protest because of what happened. And it's changing the way they have to do their job. It's almost one of those, is it better to get this out early to prevent more crimes from happening and us having to take a more active role, or protect the integrity of this investigation in this case and hope everybody plays like they should on the playground?
And what happens is you've got people that want to know what happened and they want to know what happened right now. They don't want you to take the time to sort through things and look at all those 10 different camera angles
Right.
and get eyewitness interviews of people that didn't have a camera.
Right.
And when they do start to release all of this, people think that the law enforcement or the investigators have been trying to put together this massive ploy to distract what actually happened.
Right. Well, and I think
And sometimes they do.
Sometimes they might. There's always that possibility. And there's always there's always people with less morals than others that would do something like that. But for the most part, as open as things have gotten, it's almost impossible to get by with something like that. I mean, you've got people, people are paid to squeal within certain police departments. If you see somebody who's doing something they're not supposed to, you need to speak up.
Right.
And that happens, even though there is the blue code or whatever it is that.
You'll find in a lot of departments, they have the same type of attitude about what's going on as just the general public. And in general, it doesn't matter what line of work you're in, you've got the same proportion of good moral people to people that are just, doing the easy way, taking the easy way out, doing what they can to get what they want. So I don't think when you put any industry, especially law enforcement, on a pedestal, I don't think it serves anybody in that.
No, I think that's what it comes down to. It comes down to the actual players, the actual people
Right.
themselves, and
That's
what
it.
their morals are. And to that point, I've heard a lot of discussion and debate around, do you want more police officers or fewer that are more quality? Because, some people would actually go as far as saying you're getting what you pay for. When you try to skimp on paying for law enforcement,
Right.
you get the less quality law enforcement people.
Well, I mean, that's it. You're looking quality versus quantity. Do you want every street with an officer on the corner, or do you want people out there proactively interacting with the public, and then, of course, reactively enforcing?
Well, I've
criminal
got
behavior?
two things that come to mind on that one. One, I'd rather have totally personal opinion. I'd rather have the quality officers and fewer of them. But I would also, though, to caveat that, I would also like to see the citizens themselves
Right. Police themselves.
being able to police themselves in their neighborhood
So-
better.
And again, this is kind of going into politics, but I would almost rather see taxpayer money not go into an influx of officers, like you say, one on each corner. I would rather see that taxpayer money be used to train citizens to protect themselves and their property.
Libertarian Mikey raises his head.
So, but honestly, though, I don't think it's, and we talked about granny laws earlier. I don't know if it's the government's job to overrule every decision or every factor in our lives. I think it would be better suited if they would empower the citizens rather than enforce the citizens, so to speak. Or
Communist Mikey raises his head. I've seen two different Mikeys.
We're going to have to bring Josh back on when we do get to some true politics. 'cause
maybe not. because
That's
he's
going to be an
calling me
episode.
communist. Thank you for listening to Modern Morality. Please visit our website at modernmoralitymedia.com and leave us some feedback about the show. We look forward to exploring more with you. Until next time.